Early in Chapter 12. Loss, Unmourned. Early in 1995, I received a call from Eazy-E. "What's up, E? It's been a while. How are you?" Eazy, in fact, wasn't well and was in the hospital at Cedars-Sinai, recuperating from pneumonia. After getting me up to speed, he quickly got to the purpose of his call. "I heard you're directing a video for Dre." "I am," I responded. I had met with Dr. Dre about directing the music video for the release of California Love. Dre loved my video concept, a hood version of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. At this time, Pac was not on the record at all. This was strictly Dre's version of the song, and it was banging. As soon as I heard it, my imagination went wild. I was ready to shoot the crap out of that video. We were about to go into production until, "It's not a good idea for you to be on that set. You don't need to be around Suge." Damn it. I was so caught up in the art and excitement that I had totally forgotten about Suge Knight and his ties to Dre at the time. Besides the ongoing issues with the dissolution of NWA, Suge had a reputation for violence, and after meeting him a few times, I could see his level of intimidation with my own eyes. The thought of Suge on the set gave me pause. Damn, E, I didn't even think about that part. Eazy made me promise I would step away. Instead, he had another possible video he was interested in me directing. He felt bad, I could tell. And this was a way to make up for work he thought he was taking from me. That meant a lot. And I played along and told him, "Yeah, give me the music. I'll see what I can come up with." Then, thanking him for having my back, I asked, "When can I come up there and visit you?" Eazy told me that a visit to the hospital would be a hassle, and he would be home soon. I gave a diplomatic excuse to Dre's team about why I couldn't direct the video, which was put on hold temporarily anyway. California Love went through unexpected changes in months to come, namely that a different version was recorded with Tupac included on the track, which made an already banging song unstoppable. Here is the funny thing. Eazy was ahead of the curve, because once Pac came onto the record, he would not have wanted me to direct the video and be on set either. Clearly, it wasn't in the stars for me to direct California Love. The video would eventually get made using my Mad Max concept, but directed by the great Hype Williams, who did it beyond justice. When E convinced me on our call that his health was getting better, I believed him. I never thought that would be the last time I would ever hear his voice. I was shocked when it was announced shortly after he called me that he had been admitted to the ICU in critical condition and was suffering from full-blown AIDS. Eric Wright, aka Eazy-E, was 31 years old when the news broke. Just before his death, he chose to go public to raise awareness about AIDS, especially with young people or anyone who believed that HIV affected only gay men and addicts. He was neither. E didn't give me one inkling that his phone call, based on concern for me, would be our last conversation. I felt like an awful friend that I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't know how to mourn for him or how to process his death, any more than I had with many losses in the past. I did the only thing I knew how to do, and that was to set the loss aside, not mourn, and just keep it moving. My first sight of Pac at Dannemora was a pleasant surprise. When he walked into the visitor's room of the facility, I thought, this man's more swole than I've ever seen him. It looked like he was spending every waking hour lifting weights, and his rebellious, fearless swag had returned. But I knew that in addition to his rigorous regimen, he'd been reading and writing up a storm. I'd been sending him books, including Kindred and Wild Seed by Octavia Butler, one of my favorite authors. Inspired, Pac loved her work and eventually wrote 2 scripts, one of which was called Kindred Spirits, and the other a fictional depiction of his legal ordeal. In even more contrast to his mood at Rikers, Pac was smiling. I would come to find out he was damn near running the place, advocating for reforms within the prison. Most of the inmates had love and admiration for him, but that created haters as well, and sometimes beef with the correctional officers. All of this made for a dangerous concoction, because Pac had no problem getting into confrontations, including with the guards. Pac's bravado was bigger than ever, as evidenced when, as soon as he was unlocked from his restraints, he grabbed me and kissed me, damn near swallowing my face. I immediately pulled away and screeched, "Boy!" Pac started laughing. "Come on, stop being a square." He went on, "I'm up here with these ugly niggas all day. What you want from me?" "Pac, please." "Well, shit, you ain't gonna marry me. A kiss is the least you can do." We both cracked up. We were good. For this visit, I traveled to upstate New York with Light, whom Pac knew well, and another female rapper friend, Nefertiti. Neff and Light joined us after I'd greeted Pac, and we sat with him kicking it and listening to all the stories of what was happening with him in general. We hadn't been there long before he calmly broke the news to us. "I'm signing with Suge Knight." Pac signing with Death Row? Suge's label? This was not good. But the three of us reacted cautiously, with the same energy of, "You sure you want to do that?" The last thing I wanted to do was press him in front of Light and Neff, or upset the confidence he seemed to feel about the decision. Instead, I decided to come see him again on my own before returning to LA. On the drive back to Dannemora, I took some time to sort things out in my head. One of the memories that came to me was of a call from Pac the year before, and how excited he was to tell me I wrote a song about our mothers. Of course, it wasn't about both our mothers. It was about Afeni. But the sentiment was our shared experience of being children with mothers who were addicts. Instead of playing it for me on the phone, he sent me a cassette. The song was Dear Mama. Pac had a bit of apprehension about the song and wanted to know my thoughts. And the first verse, he had me. "When I was young, me and my mama had beef, 17 years old, kicked out on the streets." After I listened, my immediate reaction was to cry. The song was honest, but so loving and heartfelt. I'd witnessed many of the challenges he and Afeni had faced, and I loved how he could honor her and all the beauty that outshone her difficulties. The journey he narrated in his lyrics allowed me to reflect on my mother in the same way. Dear Mama was a healing, hood style, which was not an easy feat. Knowing he had trepidation about sharing this aspect of his journey, as well as Afeni's, I called him back and reassured him. "I think this is the best song you've ever done." I told him I loved it, and that I believed Afeni would too. It was an anthem song for every mother who struggled and wasn't perfect, and I was grateful that it went on to receive so much critical acclaim. On that drive, I also thought through the different glimpses I'd caught of Marion Suge Knight over the years. The first occasion had been when a girlfriend of mine, the belle of the ball in many circles, asked me to accompany her to Gladstone's on Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu after Suge had invited her there for a dinner date. She didn't want to go alone because of his questionable reputation, which I wasn't privy to yet. From the moment we sat down at the table with him, his charm was on full blast, like a big old teddy bear. He had me fooled in that moment. It wasn't until I saw him again at Monty's, a trendy spot, with an R&B group he was looking to manage, that I witnessed his intimidation tactics. I tell you what, a fast glance around revealed he had nothing short of 3 or 4 straight-up killers surrounding that space where he was meeting with this group of young men, one of whom was a friend of mine. When I say killers, I mean they weren't just muscle. There is a difference. They were strategically placed, not too close to warrant alarm, yet close enough to foreshadow what was to come if something shouldn't go Suge's way. I watched Suge sit there calmly, a cigar stuck between his lips like he was Don Corleone, with a ring of threat around 4 young men who were no threat at all. That day I got to see that Suge didn't play fair. And when Eazy-E shared his experiences, I got a full understanding of Suge Knight's lethality. On the drive, it all came into view. At Dannemora, I was on a last resort mission to gently convince Pac that there was a way, other than signing with Suge, to get him out of jail. It was a tall order. We talked calmly, like adults. He was in jail, and he wanted out. Period. And as Pac had been waiting for, a seeming comrade had come along to save him. But I couldn't ignore the alarm ringing in my head. Pac was about to release Me Against the World, which would include Dear Mama, and debut at #1 on the album charts, a feat never accomplished by an artist while in prison. By agreeing to sign with Death Row, Pac would gain his freedom after Suge arranged the now $1.4 million required for him to be released, pending the appeal of his conviction. In return, Pac explained, I will owe 3 albums. I'm going to make my first one a double album, which will count as 2. Then make a 3rd. Then I'm done. Pac did his best to convince me he understood what he was getting into and that he had everything under control. But it all sounded too easy. You're dancing with the devil, Pac. Pac held his ground. Suge's the only nigga willing to get me out. The way he saw it, everybody else was fine and let him rot in prison. I backed off, wary as I was. After all, I wasn't the one doing time, and I had no magic wand to make Pac's situation different. Plus, I knew Suge's promises would be too potent for anyone to intercede. Call me Coco. Please, Jada, please call me Coco. I'm legally changing my name, was how Maxine first announced her news. She was so sweet, with that childlike sing-song Toronto accent of hers. Coco? No, I grumbled. I'm not calling you Coco. Your mother named you Maxine, so that's what I'm calling you. Sometimes it was entertaining to get Max flustered, the way older siblings do with younger ones, except Max was older than I was. But in this moment, it wasn't so fun. Something was off. Will, ever so gallant, piped in. Okay, Coco it is. This just made Maxine/Coco love Will more than she already did. All of this was charming, if a little eccentric, but Will and I didn't give it much thought. That was until March or so, not long after Eazy died, when I got a call from a neighbor while I was on set. My roommate was pacing around in front of the house, talking to herself, and banging on the front door trying to get in. The set was 10 minutes from my house, so I rushed home. Maxine was naked except for a robe. Max, did you lose your key? What happened? She seemed disoriented, out of it. I got locked out. I don't know. A few days later, I saw her wearing a short miniskirt, and if she moved a certain way, it was clear she had no underwear on. Maxine. Coco, please call me Coco. Coco, you can't go out like that. You need to put on some boy shorts or something with that skirt. I can see your whole name and address. I'm fine. Don't make a big deal about everything, Jada. This wasn't the only time that happened. I'd cajoled her into putting on shorts or changing her clothes, but she was increasingly manic. I thought maybe she was stressed out about her relationship or going through a rough patch. I couldn't figure it out. She then booked a job on location with a team connected to Judy Murdoch, the makeup artist on Jason's Lyric, who became my go-to for movies before she later worked with Will. An incident, happened on the set of the movie, and Judy was able to intervene. We wanted to get Maxine home to her mother, who could keep an eye on her. As soon as she got back to Toronto, Max received medical care in a hospital, and when the doctors thought she was well enough, she went to stay at her mother's house. From everything we were told later, Maxine probably had a thyroid condition, which can set up a psychological imbalance if unchecked. All we could hope was that she would get better. Throughout the summer, I talked to Maxine often. In the most heart-wrenching, pleading voice, she begged, "Please, Jada, I need to come back to LA, please. Let's get you healthy first. As soon as you're better, you can come back. Jada, I'm fine. I promise you, please. I need to come back. That's where I belong. I miss LA so much." I'd feel so guilty whenever we hung up, not being able to give her what she wanted. I missed her, but with her level of instability, I couldn't risk it. I felt terrible. A few days after a brief conversation with Maxine, I got a call from Judy. Strangely, Will happened to be there with me at the time, which was rare for the middle of a day, because he was usually on set at that time for the last season of Fresh Prince. Judy was upset but calm. She relayed that Maxine had jumped off her mother's balcony to her death, leaving behind only her shoes on the balcony floor. My heart shattered. I couldn't form words. I couldn't breathe. It was too unbearable to allow myself to feel. When I hung up, I looked at Will, who at the moment was lying on my bed next to where I'd been sitting, and said, "Maxine committed suicide." He was frozen. I remember falling back, then rolling on top of him and us making love. It was primal, me hoping to shut out the pain. I knew better, but at least the reality of her death would be gone for these moments. I needed to feel anything other than the agony of this incomprehensible tragedy. In the long run, the unbearable loss would catch up to me, surfacing over and over again, throwing me into sorrow I never knew how to express. A memorial was planned, but I couldn't go. I needed to be alone and grieve by myself. In hindsight, I should have gone. There was a part of me that felt ashamed at the time, like it was my fault that Max/Coco had committed suicide. Would she have jumped if I had just let her come back to LA? In what was one of the saddest conversations of my life, I talked to Maxine's mother, who was inconsolable after losing her only child. Max's mom died about a year later, no doubt from a broken heart. Again, not knowing how to grieve or how to memorialize my friend, I simply kept it moving and stuffed down the pain and guilt. There are all kinds of loss that we don't stop long enough to mourn. Not just the loss of a loved one through death, but the breakup of a friendship that soured, or the absence of a parent who is unable to be present in your life, or the void left in the aftermath of a divorce or separation. We are just not well equipped in our society to honor the life passages brought on by such losses. I am haunted by a memory. It's the first time I've seen Pac upon his release from prison at a restaurant on La Cienega Boulevard. We're sitting together at a square table. By mid-afternoon, it's fairly empty. Pac is looking fly in a suit, stylish but casual. It's a deep navy electric blue with a slight sheen to it. I'm in a white dress of some kind. Since Pac's release, he's stepped up his style game, and I love it. Pac and I are meeting because, once again, he has a movie he wants us to do together. It's a crime story with a dark comedic edge called Gridlocked. And I listen as he explains the script and the role he thinks I'd be good for. But there's a big old monster elephant in the room we aren't mentioning. Pac knows I'm not at all happy about his get down since his release. His whole vibe has changed since his association with Suge. I can't make it all Suge's fault. Post-jail, Pac's a little different, but who isn't after doing time? And I believe he is allowing his bitterness, disappointment, and anger to be preyed upon. I'm worried about you, Pac, I say, interrupting his flow. This kicks off a hailstorm of rage as he leans across the table and into my face, aware, as I am, that we could be overheard if we don't keep our volume in check. Pac makes it clear that I don't need to be worried about him, and that since I got all Hollywood, I've forgotten what it takes to be a real nigga out here. Where's all this going? My genuine concern is his display of vengeance since he was shot and released from prison, and his participation in the steady brewing of the East Coast-West Coast beef. It's about to put Pac back in jail or worse. He cuts me off. I know what you think about me. He pauses a beat. I can see your thoughts and your dreams. I know what you thinking. You can't fucking hide from me. You done gone all Hollywood, but that's cool. That's why I got my real partners out here. I lean back across the table into Pac's face, try my best to keep my voice down. Who the fuck do you think you talking to, Pac? Talking about I'm all Hollywood. You're being reckless. We are seething at each other with a calm intensity like two bulls in a stare down, fixing to charge. I don't even know who the fuck you are anymore, he says. Ditto, nigga. The disagreement gets more intense and goes back and forth. His gist is that I am no longer a real one, and mine is that he's mad because I'm not placating his bullshit. Pac's not having my pushback, and I'm not having his disrespect. Next thing I knew, he was done talking, and so was I. When I got up to walk toward the exit of the restaurant, I was so angry my legs were shaking. We didn't say goodbye to each other and went our separate ways. As soon as I got in my car, I called my then manager, James Lassiter, who was Will's longtime friend and manager as well. In a torrent of tears, I exploded. Fuck Tupac! I don't want to do that stupid movie or anything with him! I never want to talk to him again! I tried to calm down, knowing, of course, I shouldn't be ranting to James. He was not built to take on my hysteria. All I could do was try to catch my breath. I couldn't believe that Pac and I had just had that exchange. Then again, this kind of blow-up between us was not new. The drill had always been that we would give each other the silent treatment. He was one of the few people on the planet with whom I could fight that harshly and still know there was no love lost between us. Pissed as I was, I knew, like always, that time would pass and we would say our apologies, hug it out, and we'd be back. But he was going to have to call me first this time, and I was not budging on that. He had been way out of line. So let me say this. If you have a blow-up with someone you really cherish, do not play the game of waiting for the other person to get wise. Almost a year passed. On September 8th, 1996, Pac was shot in Las Vegas, and I was in Toronto shooting the movie Woo. I was on the set when I got a page from Afeni. I called her immediately. As soon as she let me know what had happened, I told her, I can shut the set down right now and come to you guys. It's okay. He's in a coma, but he's going to be all right. With no panic or alarm in her voice, Afeni continued to give me the rundown on his condition, but kept assuring me that Pac was going to be fine. After surviving 5 bullets and everything else, he was considered invincible. That put me at ease, even though I did stop the shoot for the day. I was scheduled to leave for New York soon. Will had planned an early birthday celebration for me with our families because he was promoting a movie out of the country and would be gone on the 18th. Should I cancel the trip to New York, Faye? She suggested I fly out after the celebration, telling me, He should be awake by then. She assured me that everybody was there, holding it down, including Pac's fiancée, Kadada. Afeni didn't think for a moment that he could actually die, and neither did I. For the next 5 days, I checked in regularly with Afeni on Pac's condition and planned to head out to Vegas on the 14th, whether he was awake or not. On the night of the 13th, we were in our hotel room in New York as the events of the evening were winding down. Cherie called Will, and I overheard her on the phone saying, "Pac just died." I said to Will, "Hang up. She don't know what the fuck she's talking about. She's lying." I was pissed. How dare she spread a fucking terrible rumor like that? How dare she do that? Will, seeing how upset I was, told Cherie he would call her back. Just then I got a knock on the door of my hotel room, and it was Fawn. As soon as I saw the frozen pain and sorrow on her face, I knew what Cherie had said was true. My knees buckled. I nearly fell to the floor. My whole system crashed. I lost my breath for a moment. I never once saw myself on this planet without him here, somewhere on it. I felt a huge piece of love for me leave the world, a part of myself gone. In its place was rageful sadness. Pac had been a mirror, a reflection of the best of myself, a tether. My heart felt ravaged, like a million stabbings every second. My worst fear had come true. For too long, I drank the Kool-Aid and allowed the illusion of his invincibility to squander time. I hadn't spoken to him in damn near a year. I could not punish Pac's memory by thinking that he left this world in any way, questioning how much I loved him, because I know for a fact he did know. Yet I tortured myself thinking whether things might have been different if I had been strong enough to express my fears without judgment, to prevent my anger from blinding me to the fact that life is fragile. In the end, I don't think that would have made a difference. He made his choices, and he fulfilled the plan God laid out for him. But it would take me a very, very long time to accept that truth. I'm glad I never made it to Vegas, though. I'm glad my last memory of Tupac is not an image of him in a coma. I'm glad I didn't have to share space with Suge as Pac was dying. When I heard that Pac had been cremated, I was very upset and immediately believed Suge was the one behind that decision, which made me ask questions. I never heard Pac say that he wanted to be turned into ashes. Never. Tupac Amaru Shakur had been murdered, and the first action was to burn his body into ashes? What if we needed his physical body for more evidence? Pac only ever talked about being buried in a casket. He spoke of it in songs and told me of the morbid fantasies he had of his death, envisioning masses in the streets following his casket to his grave. In my mind, something wasn't right. To make matters worse, at the private memorial Afeni chose to have in Jasmine's backyard, I answered the door, and it was Suge, who delivered Pac's ashes into my very hands. In the cardboard box one is given by the crematorium. I'll never forget the slight smile in his eyes when he handed me that box, like, "There's your homie." Now, I could be putting 20 on 10 because of the state I was in. Between Suge's smirk as he handed me those ashes and my assumptions about Suge's involvement in what happened to Tupac, I might have been putting a lot of color on the moment. But I tell you what, and I do myself no good to say it, I wanted him to pay. I never felt that intense need for revenge in me before, not even after being held at gunpoint. Pac was dead, and Suge handed me his ashes in a little cardboard box like it was just another fucking day. No I'm sorry for your loss. Nothing. I felt helpless, and I hated myself for my helplessness. I hated that I had no way to get even, take revenge, confront Suge, find the joker who pulled the trigger, make somebody fucking pay. I hated the streets, I hated hip-hop, and every fake-ass gangster acting like they really on some gangster shit, when within only 6 months, we had 2 hip-hop giants dead, Pac and Biggie, and don't nobody know nothing, and ain't nobody trying to do nothing? Fuck this bullshit and everybody in it. For years to come, I would feel like I had let Pac down at the end. I had been able to show up for him for so many years, and at this most crucial time, I didn't know how to show up in a way that didn't rock the boat. It was complicated by the fact that there were people then who believed Suge had done right by Pac and his family. I knew different. Pac's life had been stolen, and as things unfolded, I would find that his trust had been betrayed as he was making moves to change the direction of his life. There was a lot happening, and I felt I was putting a lot at risk if I kept involving myself in Pac's matters. I knew eventually with my continued involvement, it was going to pull Will in, and I just could not jeopardize that. Pac had done his best to keep me away from the danger of his world. He would not want this moment to be any different. I knew that for certain. I swallowed my pride and did the most unfathomable thing and walked away. Thank goodness Afeni eventually put on her cape and went to war to expose how Pac had been financially exploited during his death row tenure. And that wasn't the half of it. As time passed, it healed nothing. I didn't even know how to grieve Pac. So I stuffed my rage, my pain, and my shame into a forgotten place within me. And I never again felt the same love for hip-hop or the streets. From then on, it was all dead to me. When our grief cannot be spoken, it falls into the shadow and re-arises in us as symptoms. So many of us are depressed, anxious, and lonely. Francis Weller, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. It's not often that I see grief addressed directly or addressed at all when it comes to spiritual recovery and emotional sobriety. Too many of us become stuck in grief because we don't understand the need to grieve. And culturally, we are not taught how to grieve. I feared my grief. My hope was that time and staying busy would make all the pain of loss go away. The accumulation of unresolved grief collects in the body and eventually feeds into our depressive states, into our anger, shame, and heartbreak. Maturity teaches us to respect grief. The fact that life is full of losses of many kinds can be a very difficult reality to accept and embrace. But if we have the courage to make friends with the intense feelings that come with the mourning process, we give ourselves permission to be vulnerable. For many of us, it's daunting to remove our armor and experience our vulnerability. But if we can't respect that place in ourselves or in others, we can't touch our grief, and we won't make safe space for others to touch theirs. It's in the respect and care for vulnerability that we can find intimacy with ourselves and others and learn to hold space with love for intense emotions like grief. Are there any losses in your life that you have not given yourself permission to mourn? Do you need to know how to grieve? If so, check out the book by Francis Weller, The Wild Edge of Sorrow, as a start. A note to those who have lost someone special. You'll never get over it. So stop looking for that moment. We just learn to accept and cope with the fact that they are no longer here and place them upon an altar in our heart and celebrate them there.